Morning, everybody. We are still expecting a fair few people here, so I'll give it a few minutes and then we'll get going. If anybody is not able to see the presentation, let me know. You guys should be able to see the title slide of the presentation here. So if you can't, just message into the chat. Um, I will take no news to be good news. Give it 1 more minute here, I think. Can still see some people joining as we go through. So just give it another minute or two. I would say that's probably good enough there. Plenty of people here. If anybody does join late, this session is recorded. So you will be able to catch up, even if you do know somebody's about to join late. They'll be able to catch up using the recording after the session. So you'll get the slides as well as the recording after the session. Somebody from our team will be in touch to provide that to you. So before we actually jump into the body of the presentation, I'll just briefly introduce myself for those of you that don't know me. Some of you might already know me from different support tickets, but I'm a junior data and AI engineer here at Leaf. So obviously, data analysis and AI are sort of what I do day to day. Some of you might have done some support tickets with me on different areas like SharePoint and other things as well. But my main focus day to day, like I said, is data and AI. And when it comes to AI, specifically Copilot, which I'll talk about obviously in lots of detail today. Um, so I should say, sorry again, just to remind you, if you've just joined, the session is going to be recorded. That recording will be made available to you, as will the slides afterwards. So don't worry if, like I said, somebody from your company joins later or anything, the recording is going to be there. This is just a very brief overview. I'll go into more detail into all of these points, obviously, as we go through, but just to sort of give you an idea of the general sections we'll look at, I want to briefly talk about AI as a whole before then going into more specific Microsoft implementations of AI, so Copilot and specifically Microsoft 365 Copilot. And then we'll talk a little bit about agents as well. My mouse has decided to stop working. That's good. There we go. Copilot agents is something that I will touch on at the end as well. Again, we won't be going into a huge amount of detail into how you as users can start to use it. This is more of an idea of why it's useful, some of the things that can be achieved, as opposed to here's how you go and do it. If there are some specific areas, because there is obviously an awful lot that you can do across lots of areas, if there are specific implementations or areas that are of interest to you and your business, you can get in touch with us after and we can do some slightly more tailored sessions that will be more useful to your users. If you are a company that don't use an awful lot of Excel, there won't be much value to me here going into great detail on how to use Copilot within Excel. If, however, though the Teams or the Outlook stuff is really of interest to you, we can organize some more tailored sessions after that. Q&A is enabled for this. You should be able to see at the top of your meeting window the Q&A button. If any questions pop into your head, or even if you have some questions now that you want to put into the Q&A, feel free to. Just please put it in the Q&A rather than the chat, and we will answer them at the end. I won't answer them as the questions come in. It'll just probably take up a little bit too much time that way. But if you do have any questions, put them in the Q&A as soon as you want to ask them, and we'll go over them at the end. So just to get started, like I said, I want to go over AI and generative AI, or just Gen AI, some people would call it a lot for short, about what it actually is before then jumping into Microsoft's version of it. So AI is a really, really broad area. I think most people's exposure to AI is generative AI, and they just think that is what AI is, this sort of conversational tool where you ask for something and then you receive something back. That absolutely is AI, but there are lots of other things that fall under that umbrella. So we just want to briefly talk about that. AI is basically any technology that means that a machine can then start to learn and then make decisions that mimic human intelligence. So that mimic human intelligence is important. Doesn't replace human intelligence. It is not replacing your brain, but it mimics it in a way that you can then use it as a tool to help you. So I'll talk in more detail about why that is. Um, Generative AI then specifically creates new content. It's that stuff that you're used to. Yes, this is a presentation about Copilot and Microsoft's implementation of AI, but I won't pretend that other versions don't exist. Most people, if not everybody here, will have heard of the likes of ChatGPT, Gemini from Google, lots of other ones out there. But that sort of generative AI is you ask for something and you get something back in return that's been created for you, whether that is a draft of an email, a chunk of text like that, an image, a video, some code, whatever it might be. Um, this is a really, really um, as a very big oversimplification of how AI models are made. If there was somebody listening to this who develops AI models, they might take offense at this, but it is the simplest way to talk about it if you want to condense it down to just a really short description of how it's made. Um, it is essentially probability. It's really, really sophisticated probability. I have in the past been involved of seeing how these things are made. They generally, not all the time, but generally they're based on something called neural networks. Neural networks are designed to emulate how the brain, like human brain, processes information, hence like neuron. So they're really sophisticated and they're really, really complex models, but they do essentially boil down to statistics and probability. So the way it'll work is these models, when they're in development, they will be shown some data. When I say some data, I mean millions and millions of data points. And they will basically be told, the person developing the model will essentially tell the model, if you get this input, this is the correct type of output that you should be providing. When it does that over millions and millions of data points, the model essentially learns patterns and starts to learn behaviors. That can then, once it's rolled out for people, when we put it in our new or novel inputs that it's never seen before, based on all those patterns that it learned before, it can decide in all probability what's the correct way to answer that input. So what's the correct output or the most likely correct output based on everything that the model has learned to your input. Because that is how the decision is made, that means that there is no such thing as 100% probability that the output's 100% correct. That is not me saying don't trust them. AI models aren't good. They're brilliant. They're really sophisticated and the outputs are generally very good, but there is no such thing as a guarantee that it's going to be 100% correct. That is why I put that mimic human intelligence in, and I want to just like really stress that. There are people who are very optimistic or very pessimistic about this, and they think it's going to steal my job, or I can keep doing my job, but I don't actually need to apply my critical thinking anymore because AI will do it for me. Neither of those things, in my view, are correct. Um, AI is here to be a tool to help you be more productive, to make you more efficient, and then free up your time to do different tasks that aren't bogged down in the monotony of some of your current tasks. Um, it is not here to replace your critical thinking. So every output you get from an AI model needs to be analyzed by you as someone with a human brain that is going to be more impressive and more capable than, in my opinion, any AI model is likely to be. Um, and your AI model will never replace your subject knowledge. You are working in a field that you will have expertise in. That model will never be able to replace that. So every output that you get from an AI tool, whether it is Copilot or anything that you end up using, any output that you get, you need to be applying your critical thinking, your subject knowledge, your expertise, and deciding, is that a correct output? Is it something that's actually useful? Can I take it and actually run with it, or does something need changed about it before I do that? You absolutely should not just be taking an output and running with it without double checking it. You always need to make sure. So, yes, they're very impressive and their capabilities are really actually sophisticated and they're getting more and more complex and more impressive almost by the day at this rate. But there is no such thing as a 100% probability of a 100% correct output. So just make sure that you are letting it be a tool to aid you and you are not letting it overtake your thinking. So that's AI and generative AI as a whole. Copilot then is Microsoft's implementation of that. So it's a bit of an umbrella term. There are lots of different types of Copilots. If you were to go on to some Microsoft documentation, you would see sometimes they say which Copilot is right for you. There are different ones like Security Copilot, which is all to do with cybersecurity. We'll not talk about that today. We're really going to focus on two specific types of Copilots. There is just the Microsoft Copilot, the free consumer version of their generative AI tool, and then Microsoft 365 Copilot, which is a paid version of the same model, but it is then integrated into your Microsoft environment. So things like your Teams, your Outlook, your SharePoint, your OneDrive, all of those things. It is a paid version to get that integrated into your work environment. So the free version, just to go over what it looks like, how you could use it, how some people maybe already are using it or something similar to it. So as I said, it's free to use. That comes with the benefit, obviously, of you don't need to pay. So you can just log on to a web browser or use the app. As long as you have an internet connection, you can get access to it. You don't even need to make an account. So that comes with the benefit of, there's less hassle to make an account and you don't need to pay, which is obviously good for some people. However, there are, in my opinion, much more downsides to these free tools than there are upsides. One of them being that the only option is to be grounded in the web. So I talked about how these models learn and how they train to recognize patterns, and then they take your input and decide what the most likely best output is. The grounding is then where they go and pull specific information from if they need a specific figure, say. So if I was to put into the free version of Copilot, what is the price of a double cheeseburger from McDonald's? McDonald's menu is publicly available on their website. It could go to that publicly available website, pull the specific figure, and it'll know that that's what it needs to do based on its training. So the training helps it know, oh, I need to go to McDonald's website and pull the figure, but it still needs to go and pull the exact figure and then tell you what it is. If you were to ask, though, what is the annual leave policy at my company, unless that is publicly available, which I highly doubt anybody is publishing publicly what their annual leave policy is, the AI tool, the free one, is not going to be able to get that information for you. It will be able to get you, say, what the statutory limit is in the UK. You must have at least this based on the laws, but your specific company might have more. Ask somebody at your company. Is some variation of that's likely to be the answer. So the grounding is only in the web, only in publicly available sites that anybody could access. What that means is it doesn't have access to your organization, your Microsoft environment that I talked about, the paid version getting access to. Technically speaking, if you wanted to, you could manually do a file per prompt if you really wanted to. I want to redraft this report that I've written, or I want to turn this report into a presentation, whatever it is. Technically speaking, you could do that in the free version. However, that is a very not good idea and not to be recommended at all, because there are no security guarantees within these free versions. So essentially, there is no guarantee that your prompts and your data that you upload with your prompts is not then going to leak outside of your organization and sort of be stored elsewhere in that company's storage, which essentially is a breach in confidentiality, depending on what it is that you're doing with your work data. So more so in the States, but there are already plenty of cases of people having legal action taken against them for breaching confidentiality, not because they have deliberately shown a piece of confidential information to somebody that shouldn't see it. They've uploaded it to a free AI tool that is then given it the potential to be leaked out. And even though it's not a deliberate breach in confidentiality, legally speaking, it's being treated the same way as a deliberate one, because you are still putting that same sensitive data at risk as if you had shown it to someone deliberately. So yes, it is possible, but really, really not advised. Not for work stuff, and even your own personal private stuff. By no means would I ever be putting like my date of birth or my address, anything like that, or my phone number. I would be putting that into a free AI tool. I don't know what reason you'd have for putting your phone number into an AI tool, but if you were, I wouldn't advise doing it in the free one. So just to show you what that would look like then, like I said, you can access it through web browser or an app. This is what the native app looks like. You'll see up on the top left, it just says Copilot, and then it's a pretty blank screen, really. There's not much going on. If you have used the likes of free Copilot before, or ChatGPT, or the free version of Gemini, anything like that, this will look really familiar to you. It's basically just you having a conversation. You ask for something, you get an answer back, you keep going, you keep going. So that's the free version. Not a lot going on. It still has its purpose, definitely. I would have no problem going on to the free version of Copilot and saying, I've got these 5 ingredients in my fridge, suggest me a recipe. I'd have no problem doing that. But I'm certainly not going, here's a report I've written and I need to make a presentation out of it. Can you help me? I'm not doing that on the free version. I am doing that in the paid version, though. So the paid version has a lot of different benefits that I think really overtake the only downside of needing to pay for it, which I'll talk about here. So I talked about grounding in only publicly available places for the free version. That's not the case here for this paid version. You can ground it in your organizational data. So anything that can be accessed by something called the Microsoft Graph. So things that you have access to on SharePoint sites, in your own OneDrive, Teams messages, emails, Teams meeting transcripts, all of that stuff. Copilot can automatically, or Microsoft 365 Copilot can automatically access, as well as you actually being able to manually say, go to look at this as well. It integrates really, really well with all of those apps. So in terms of, I showed you what the app looks like for the free version. There's a equivalent, just Microsoft 365 Copilot app, and it has some more enhanced features as well as some other things that the free version doesn't have. But that then also integrates into all of your apps like Word, Teams, Excel, the things that you might use day to day. You can also use that Copilot chat within it, and then they all have their own unique features. There are things you can do with Microsoft 365 Copilot in Teams that you can't do in Outlook, that you can't do in Word, and vice versa. Things you can do in Word and Power or PowerPoint that you can't do in Outlook or Teams, whatever it might be. They all have their own unique implementations as well as that chat. I'm not going to go into any detail on agents right now because we will come back to it, but just know that you have access to agents when you get this paid license. And the big one really to focus on is this enterprise data protection. Your prompts, what you put into the model, including any work data that you use, is protected from the outside and it's protected from the inside. So it's protected from the outside in the sense that it's not going to leave your organization. It's all accessed via the Microsoft Graph and it stays within your Microsoft environment, your work's environment. But it's also protected from the inside in terms of, I gave SharePoint as an example of one thing that Copilot or Microsoft 365 Copilot can access. If you as a user don't have permissions to a SharePoint resource, your Copilot also won't have access to it. It will respect those permissions that already exist. So you don't need to worry about data leaking outside of your organization. And you also don't need to worry about this AI tool somehow giving somebody access to something internally that they shouldn't. It will respect those internal permissions as well. So your data is protected from both sides. The app then looks a little bit different. If you look, you might not be able to see it. It's quite small there, but at the top left, it doesn't just say Copilot. It says M365 Copilot. This menu on the left then has a few more options, things like Notebook that I'll not go into, but there's agents and then there's the chat and search. This toggle here, this toggle button is how you then bounce between which grounding you want. Do you want to be grounded in your work data, things like SharePoint and OneDrive? That's where I want you to pull specific information from. Or do you want to be grounded in the web? Go to publicly available websites instead. These prompts then in the free version are things just like give me a recipe or write me a joke, whatever it might be. This one is more enhanced then. It detects these files that I've been using from my work environment all the time, and it's giving me suggested prompts based on what I might need to do with them. And then it's very small, but it's very powerful, and a big focus is this green shield. If you have this app already or you're considering it, you might not see it in the top right. It might be on the top left or even in the middle. It depends how big your screen is. But that green shield basically tells you that you've got that enterprise data protection. You don't need to worry about your data from the inside or from the outside. It's all protected using this Microsoft standard of enterprise data protection. You can even click on that shield and go and read some articles that Microsoft have published about what it means and how it works. So I said before, that's Microsoft 365 Copilot Chat. That's its own app, and you can treat it just like any other AI tool that you might have used already. But you have the security, and then you have that work grounding, so you can access your work files automatically from it. That chat is then available within all the apps I'm going to talk about now. So Teams, Outlook, Excel, all these other ones that I'll talk about. But then they all have their own specific, unique things that they can do in it as well as that chat. So Teams is a really, really great one. I think there's a lot of time savings to be had within Teams here. So you can prepare for your meetings in advance. The meeting will be in your calendar if it's been prepared in advance or scheduled in advance. You can then use the title of that event or click into the event and start preparing for it. It'll automatically detect any communications you've had with your colleagues that are relevant to it, and it can help you prepare. You can ask questions about it, or it can even suggest things that you should be reading before it. You can also choose if you're not going to make a meeting to follow it, and then you'll be given a recap at the end of the meeting, even if you haven't attended it. In the terms of using it within meetings, you can ask questions about what's been going on in the meeting, and that includes if you join the meeting late. So if somebody was to join a meeting 20 minutes in and it's an hour-long meeting, they don't need to worry about saying, sorry, can we stop here and everybody catch me up? They can just get caught up by asking Copilot as the meeting continues to go on, and it sort of doesn't interrupt that flow and keeps the meeting going. Afterwards, then there'll be meeting recaps available, and then you can even enable some really, really advanced features that when I say really advanced, they're capable of really advanced things, but they're very simple and straightforward still for us as users to implement them. Still just a click of one or two buttons. You can have an AI note taker embedded into your team meetings. Those notes are written live, and then they're available in the recap. And they can, even if you are someone that uses Microsoft Planner, they can automatically generate Microsoft Planner tasks based on what's been agreed in the meeting, and they can give that and assign it to somebody based on what's been said in the meeting. So there's some really, really advanced stuff there that'll save you a lot of time, but it's very straightforward for you as a user to actually go ahead and implement it. Same thing goes for Outlook. Outlook's probably the last place I explored using Copilot in. It just wasn't my focus when I started using it. I know I regret that a bit and wish I'd started using it sooner, because it's probably the place I use it second most after Teams now. Um, Outlook is capable of some really great things. There are the sort of capabilities that you might expect based on your own usage of Gen AI already. Things like drafting an email for you, or taking something that you've written and redrafting it to make it sound a bit different. That might be something that you're already comfortable doing and sort of would expect from an AI tool. But there are some more advanced things here that, again, aren't difficult to implement, but really enhance it. So one of the things you can do is you can give Outlook or Copilot within Outlook some really specific instructions about how you want your drafts to sound. I think an issue people would have when they use AI tools to draft messages and things is that they'll go, okay, that's great, but it sounds really robotic. That's not how I speak. I now need to spend time redrafting it to make it sound more like me. And the time that I saved by not writing the email in the first place is kind of overtaken by the time to redraft. You can now give instructions, really specific instructions as well, in terms of, this is how I like to start emails, this is how I like to end emails, my tone is this, I like to say things as concisely as possible, or maybe you're someone who likes to go into as much detail as possible, I like to use this sort of language. You can really give quite large, really specific sets of instructions, and then those drafts are going to sound much more like what you want in the first place. And then that time saving is actually applied to, you don't need to worry about spending a long time redrafting it on the other side, because you've given some instructions to it beforehand and it'll sound much more like you. Um, this scheduling meetings, then, again, if you were to actually sit back and think about what's being done, it's really, really advanced, but it's clicking one button or clicking two buttons on our end. So from an email, you can click one button and it will schedule a meeting. It will automatically invite the attendees based on the email. It will title the meeting based on the email. It will write an agenda in terms of some bullet points, as well as summarizing anything that's been talked about already, all within the agenda section of the meeting. It'll attach the email as an attachment so anyone can go and read through everything if they wanted to. The only thing you actually need to do is pick a time and a date. So really, really quick. If you wanted to write all of that yourself, it would take some time. If it's a big email thread, it would take quite a long time to read through everything that's been said, summarize it, put it in an agenda pre-meeting. That's now done for you instantly at the click of a button. Similarly, you can go sort of the other side of things and you can make a blank event, title it however you want, add who you want to go to that meeting, and then it will draft an agenda for you based on what the title is, who's going to it. It will automatically scan all your communications across all your channels, so things like Teams and emails and Outlook. It will scan all of them and it will summarize anything relevant based on the title of the meeting and who's going to it. And again, really, really fast, instant almost agenda written for you. As I said, I'm not going to be doing that and then going, that's been done, that's definitely going to be perfect. I will read through it, I will double check it and make sure that it's all correct and accurate. But most of the time, I need to make very little, if any, changes to it. It is really powerful. Excel, then, I am a data analyst by trade, I guess. I'm a data analyst, so I kind of nerd out over the Excel capabilities of it. Maybe it's not relevant to you guys, not everybody, but certainly I think it's really, really powerful within Excel. You can really quickly generate some insights by just asking natural, the same sort of, if you imagine when you are looking at some data and you're sort of thinking to yourself, what business questions are people going to want answered from this data? What's the best performing product? What's the worst performing product? How have the sales been month on month? Has anything, I know we had a campaign at this time, a marketing campaign at this time. Did that have any effect on the sales? All of those actual business questions that you could think about trying to answer yourself by looking at the data, you can now ask that in plain English, plain language, whatever you want to call it, what you would actually use to speak. You can just ask Copilot for it within Excel and it'll now be able to provide those insights for you again, basically instantly. It's really good for generating formulas, even if they're if you are someone that's really comfortable in Excel to the point that you will be making really long-winded formulas to use, it's still time consuming. There are still lots of brackets and lots of commas to make sure are in the right place, things like that, that even if you know exactly what you're doing, it's easy to just make a slight mistake. These can now be generated by Copilot, again, just by asking plain language, can you make this formula that does this job for me? You might even end up discovering a more, efficient way to do it based on what Copilot gives you. Um, if one's if there's a broken formula, it can fix it for you and explain why it was broken. And then I always like to talk about if you are in a department where a new employee is joined and you have lots of existing Excel sheets in production already that you're all using, they might have some really complex formulas or just some things that the person needs to get caught up on. Rather than you needing to take the time out to explain it all to them, they can just query Copilot and ask, what's this formula in this cell doing? Why is it doing it? All of that things. Python then again might not be relevant to everybody. If you don't know what Python is, it's a coding language, and it's used by data scientists and data analysts a lot. You can do some really, really advanced analysis, slightly more advanced, or in some cases, way more advanced than what is generally available in Excel. But it's a coding language, which means you have to learn how to code. From experience, it's not a quick coding language to learn. It is not the hardest one in the world, but it's not the easiest either. So it takes a good bit of time to learn, but now again, it's integrated within this Copilot within Excel. So you can do some really, really advanced analysis by just asking to do advanced analysis in Python in plain English and just ask what you want to be made and it'll do it for you. And if you're someone who is starting to learn Python and you just aren't 100% confident in using it, it will also show you the code snippets that were generated to produce the output. So you can even start learning how to, you can even use it as an aid to help you use Python better by looking at the codes that are produced for you. So really, really powerful. Word then, there are probably less what I would call unique features in Word. I still think it's really powerful and I still use it all the time. But it's more of the things you would probably expect, like, redrafting or summarizing big blocks of text. But one thing or a few different things that are unique to Word that I think are great are if there is a document that already exists, that's already populated, if you open it and you've got your Copilot license, an automatic summary will be generated for you and you can edit what you want that summary to be like. You can ask for it to be more brief. You can ask for it to be more detailed. You can query things about it. You can ask questions about it. What are the key figures if there are any data included in the word? So really, really time-saving stuff. And then you can also translate using Copilot. Some of you might be saying, there's already an inbuilt translation tool in Word, which I know there is, but it comes with the same security risks that something like a free AI tool would, that it doesn't stay in your environment. Whenever you put into that translation tool, it gets sort of exported out to an external tool and then comes back to you. But if you use Microsoft 365 Copilot to translate, you don't need to worry about that. Your data stays secure. PowerPoint then, I know from personal experience, you can know exactly what you want to include in a PowerPoint, but sitting looking at a blank slide deck can be a little bit like, oh, where do I even start here? I wish I just had some draft of some slides and I could even start editing them as I want. You can now do that. You can now, you can say, create me a presentation on whatever you want, or because it's integrated into your environment, you can say, create a presentation based on this report, and you can point to the report that's sitting in a SharePoint or in your OneDrive, and you can say, this is what I want you to make a presentation for me on, and it makes you a presentation however long you specify. You can specify like the maximum number of slides. You can provide a template that you want as a design template. There's lots of things you can do. You can do that for an entire presentation. You can do it just for one slide at a time if you really wanted. You can create images, from scratch that you want to insert into your slides. And then if there's a presentation that already exists, you can ask for that to be summarized as well as sort of a PowerPoint implementation. A fairly new one, it's actually so new I don't even have it on the slides here, is that you can now do AI or Copilot, I guess, specifically generated speaker notes. So if you have a populated presentation and you don't have any speaker notes that you want, again, can be a little bit like daunting, like, oh, this is a really long presentation. Where am I going to start with my notes? You can use Copilot to detect what's on the slides and generate speaker notes for you, which again would be quicker probably just to redraft what's already there than to start from scratch and start writing them yourself. So just to compare then, we've got the free version on the left, and then we've got the paid Microsoft 365 Copilot on the right of this table. As I said, in my eyes, I understand that a slight downside, or maybe not a slight downside to some people, is you have to pay for Microsoft 365 Copilot. But I think all of these features really overcome that downside by quite a distance in my eyes. The fact that you have access to agents, which I'll talk about, in-app integrations that I showed you, the security that I showed you, the fact that you can pull from your organizational data, not just go into publicly available data, I think really does make it worth the investment. So I'll just finish off here by talking about agents briefly. Agents could be an entire hour-long presentation, and I have done entire hour-long training sessions on agents already. There's lots to talk about, but we just want to keep this fairly brief just to give you an idea of what they are if you've never heard of them. So agents exist outside of Copilot as well. They're not specific to Copilot. They are an AI tool, and is essentially taking an already existing AI model, so something like Copilot's AI model or ChatGPT or whatever it is, taking that model that already exists and essentially giving it some really specific instructions and saying, I want you to do this really niche role. So I don't want you to be a general purpose tool that everyone can use for everything. I want you to be this really, really specific example of a role that we want you to do, and that's all you're going to do. So they can range from really simple things like data retrieval, which I say simple, I mean that is simple in terms of what the process actually is. It still can achieve tons of time saving and be really powerful. But in terms of the world of what it's capable of, AI models are capable of, it's quite simple, just data retrieval. You can make it a little bit more complex. So don't just retrieve data and then send someone an email based on that data, say it's task oriented, to the really complex, which just aren't relevant to us at this point in time for most users, where they're fully autonomous. They don't need any input from us at all. They just run in the background and do things for you. That's very complex, not just in terms of what they're doing, but in terms of implementing them. They're not really relevant to Copilot agents, but they are possible. The big thing really about AI agents, and this is a feature of Copilot agents, is you can customize what's called their knowledge base, essentially their grounding. So instead of it being go to my SharePoint, my OneDrive, scan through everything, they might not find it. If you have a huge knowledge base and you're asking something really specific, it might not find it. Or if you're using a free tool, then it's only going to go to publicly available stuff. So it won't actually be able to find possibly the exact information you want. You can actually say you're grounded now in these 3 documents, and that is the only place you go. So you have a very specific, smaller subsection of knowledge, and that's the only thing I want you to worry about. And then it means that there's a higher probability that the output that you're going to ask for is going to be correct, because it's pulling from less data. So obviously, like I said, these aren't just AI features, they are Copilot features as well. So you can build agents in Copilot and assign really specific roles or ask them to do some tasks. Like I said, they can be quite simple in terms of what they do, like data retrieval, or you can make them more complex. You would have to use something called Copilot Studio for the slightly more complex things, which again could be an entire other presentation in itself, but we'll not go into detail on it. So I should say before moving on as well, that because it's linked to Microsoft 365 Copilot, it operates just as securely as the standalone Microsoft 365 version we were talking about. So you don't need to worry about your data leaking outside, and you don't need to worry about internal permissions not being respected. That all still applies, but it's now just do a more niche subset of data. So why would we want to use them? I think the best way to say why we would want to use them is to talk about an example of one that is made, not just, I'm not going to say, oh, I'm amazing, I've made this. Lots of people have used this as an example agent that they use, would be like an HR like help bot for their company. So new starts or people who have recently started will obviously take some time to get used to being in a company, learning all the policies and procedures, things like leave policy, all, pay structure, whatever it might be. They might then need to ask somebody that works in HR or somebody in management that knows this information like the back of their hand. They might need to quite regularly ask them questions about that. That takes up time of the person having to answer the question, and it takes up the time of the person waiting to get the answer back before they can maybe do something that they need to do. So obviously there's some wasted time there, and the more that happens, the more wasted time there is. What we can do instead is that manager or that HR person that knows the information like the back of their hand might be the people that have actually ended up making these 3 HR documents. That's why they know it so well. What you can do instead is provide these 3 HR documents to an agent and say, you're an expert in only these 3 documents. If anybody asks you a question about HR, you are only using these 3 documents, and that's your only job. Now, the person that's asking the question doesn't need to wait for the answer to come back because it's an AI tool. It'll basically be instant. the person that used to answer the question now no longer needs to answer the question because somebody else is doing it for them. It obviously has the benefit of operating 24/7. Real employees go to meetings, they take holidays, they get sick, they don't work 24 hours a day, rightly so. So there is just no gap. There's no gaps in waiting for information to be, transferred across there. The person can ask the agent and they get it straight away. Another thing then I've not really mentioned there is that they're very easy to deploy now, especially in Copilot. Agents have been around for longer than most people realize, but they've been quite complex. They've basically required some coding knowledge to do. You don't need any coding knowledge anymore. For the more advanced ones, if you're used to something like Power Automate, it'll definitely help. But for a simple one, like I've just explained there, the HR helper, all you need to be able to do is speak, is ask for what you want and clearly say some instructions about how you'd like it to interact with people. And that's you, completely code free, and you've implemented that. So really, really powerful and really not difficult to implement. Last thing then to highlight is what is a potential return on investment. Like I said, the downside to paying for anything for people is they have to pay for it. So right now, the current license fee for a Microsoft 365 Copilot license is £23.10 per user per month. I think it is a very, very conservative estimation to say if you have a Microsoft 365 Copilot license, you will save yourself 2 hours per month. I think that's very conservative. I actually think 2 hours per week is probably even possibly conservative. If you start to use Copilot within your daily workflow, you should find that you will have massive amounts of time savings. But even if we just stick with this really conservative 2 hours per month saved because of all this automation and all of this efficiency that you've gained from Microsoft 365 Copilot, if we compare that, then you've given the license to someone who makes £30,000. Obviously, some people earn more, some people earn less, but if you give it to someone that has a salary of £30,000, if they work 37.5 hours a week, that means their hourly wage is £15.38. If they were saving 2 hours per month, then as a business, basically, you've saved £30.76 over that month, which is obviously more than the £23.10 license fee. As I said, some people will earn more than £30,000, which means their hourly fee is more, which means that you're getting your savings more for that 2 hours. But also 2 hours per month, I really do think is a very conservative estimate of how much time you could save. So for me, I think the return on investment comes pretty clearly and pretty quickly. And yes, even if someone earns less than that and their hourly salary then is less because of that, I don't think the reality will be 2 hours per month. I think 2 hours per month is very conservative. So that is everything that I really have planned to speak about today. The next steps, I suppose, would be some to check if you guys are AI ready. So you might want to start using Copilot, but we need to check as a business, are you guys in a position to start actually rolling it out? Is your organizational data in a place that would be fit for Microsoft 365 Copilot to start using it efficiently? And then B, if A is ticked off and you guys are happy to roll it out as a business, then B, we can tailor some training sessions to you. So you don't need maybe to use it within Word and PowerPoint, but you do need to use it within Excel, Teams, and Outlook. We can tailor a session to just focus on the things that you definitely want to be using. So if you have any questions about any of that, if you want to schedule any future sessions, anything like that, my email's on the screen and I'm also putting it into the chat there. So you can get in touch with me at any time. If you just have any questions about Copilot, any questions about how you could use it, how you could check if you're ready to use it, anything like that, please feel free to get in touch. And we have just under 10 minutes left for some questions. So nothing in Q&A just yet, but if you do have any questions, please feel free to put them in Q&A there and I will do my best to give you an answer. Thank you very much for your time. If you don't have any questions, please feel free to shoot on and enjoy the rest of your day. This recording will be available, so you'll be able to see if other people have asked questions anyway. How could you use Copilot to assist with tendering for new business? Could you maybe clarify that a little bit more about what you mean by tendering for new business? I think this is more of an issue of me not knowing the business context of what you're asking there as opposed to the Copilot side of it. I think that's more the the business context of it. I'm not maybe not 100% sure what you're asking. So government tenders that we would write large documents to submit. So if it's drafting, yeah, if it's drafting large documents, obviously you can just ask it to help you draft, or if you maybe have the like key figures in a condensed format that you then need to write into a report, or vice versa, you have very, very long documents that you need to condense into key figures, you can use Copilot to help you do either of those things. And like I said, yes, they're government if they're government tenders, they might, I would assume, be sensitive information. So you don't need to worry about any of that sensitive information being leaked. Thank you very much, Oliver. Yeah, so hopefully I've understood what you mean there by tenders, but yes, you can go from long to short format or from short to long format really, really easily using Copilot. Here we go. Does Copilot support collaboration between team members, e.g., working on shared documents? Generate? Yeah. So because SharePoint is in your Microsoft environment and Copilot has access to your Microsoft environment, yeah, really like will support collaboration really easily. It'll detect the changes that you all make individually. It'll then sense that and then can give you answers based on that. So yeah, working collaboratively will definitely happen. How do we build an agent? I can do some specific training on agents, but you basically do it in one of two ways. You can build a slightly simpler version of an agent through you can build a slightly simpler version of an agent through the Copilot chat app that I showed you right at the start. And you can build some slightly more like intermediate ones, I guess you could say, through something called Copilot Studio, which functions almost the same as Power Automate. It looks very similar to it, but it's not the exact same. But if it is say a simpler one like that HR agent that I talked about, um, all you would need to do is go into the Copilot app and just give some plain, simple instructions. I want you to be an expert in this field. I've provided you with these documents. You're going to be answering questions on these documents. So there's kind of two ways that are relevant to us, but both are pretty straightforward. Just bouncing between the chat and Q&A now, seeing if anybody's asked anything. As I said, guys, feel free to enjoy the rest of your day if you don't have any questions. If you want to hang around and wait and see if somebody else asks a question, the recording will also be available anyway. But we've only really got 1 minute left, and then we will need to end the session, I'm afraid, anyway. Just double checking, nothing else in the Q&A. Thanks so much. Thank you very much. Thanks for attending. Thanks, Chili. Okay, for anybody still here, I'm afraid that is us out of time. I do need to rush on to do something else, I'm afraid. So we will end the session here. Um, as I said, my email's in the chat. So if you do have any questions afterwards, please feel free to get in touch, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thank you very much for your time. Have a nice day.